Corporal Marcus Hayes, a highly trained and decorated Marine sniper, had long been accustomed to discipline, focus, and the intense pressure of life-or-death situations, but nothing had prepared him for the surreal nightmare he was about to face on the quiet suburban streets of his hometown. It was an early morning, the kind where the sun had only just begun to cast its golden hues over the quiet neighborhood, birds chirping softly in the background, and the air still cool and fresh from the night before. Marcus had decided to start his day with a run, something he did religiously to maintain both his physical fitness and mental clarity. His strides were steady and measured, each breath controlled as he jogged past familiar sights: the corner store, the park where he used to play as a child, the school he once attended, all now part of a peaceful routine that reminded him of simpler times. But peace was not to last. As he rounded a corner near an intersection, a patrol car pulled up alongside him abruptly, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder with a sharp screech that startled both Marcus and a few nearby early risers. Two officers stepped out, their expressions stern and unyielding, eyes fixed on him in a way that instantly made his muscles tense. The taller of the two began questioning him aggressively, demanding to know why he was out running in that neighborhood. At that hour, Marcus, bewildered, asked what he had done wrong, but the officers ignored his questions and instead began accusing him of being involved in a robbery that had taken place only an hour earlier. The description they read off a report matched his height and skin color, vague enough to implicate countless men, but here and now it was Marcus who stood accused. He reached calmly into his running jacket pocket and pulled out his military identification card, showing it with a composed voice that he was a Marine and had no connection to any crime. Yet, despite his clear attempts to identify himself, the officers remained unconvinced. One of them reached behind Marcus's back and pulled out a pair of cold metal handcuffs. The shock hit Marcus like a blow. How could they treat him this way? He who had faced enemies overseas with steady hands and unflinching courage was now being treated as a suspect on the streets he called home. The cold cuffs snapped tightly around his wrists, biting into his skin as he was roughly pushed against the patrol car. The pain was both physical and emotional. Passers-by paused, some frowning, others whispering amongst themselves. The sight of a black man in handcuffs was all too familiar, yet no one spoke up loudly enough to stop it. Marcus's heart pounded fiercely, not from exertion, but from a wild mix of disbelief, frustration, and a deep-seated anger that burned hotter than any desert sun he had encountered in combat. This was not just an arrest. It was a wound to his identity, an assault on the very dignity he had fought to protect in faraway lands. Memories flooded his mind, long nights in hostile environments, the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, the sacrifices made by him and his comrades, only to come back and be judged by the color of his skin and an erroneous suspicion. The handcuffs were no longer just a physical restraint, but a symbol of systemic injustice that many had warned him about, but that he had hoped would never touch him personally. As he was led to the police car, his movements restricted and his voice reduced to protests that fell on deaf ears, Marcus caught the stares of his neighbors, some curious, some fearful, some silently condemning. He wondered if any of them recognized the man behind the cuffs, if they knew the battles he had fought or the medals he had earned. The shame and humiliation were overwhelming, but beneath it all simmered a fierce resolve not to let this moment define him. He clung to the memory of his training, calm under fire, strategic thinking, patience, and vowed that if he could survive a sniper's mission behind enemy lines, he could face this ordeal with dignity. Yet, the question gnawed at him relentlessly. How could a country he had sworn to defend betray him in such a manner? The ride to the station was long and silent, punctuated only by the cold steel clinking softly as he adjusted his wrists. Inside, Marcus planned the steps ahead, knowing that his fight was not just for himself but for every person who had ever been unfairly targeted. His mind raced, weighing legal options and the possibility of the story going public. He refused to be a victim. Instead, he would be a voice. This morning run that was meant to be a simple exercise had turned into a crucible of injustice, but Marcus Hayes was determined to turn the fire into a forge, shaping a future where respect and truth could overcome prejudice and misunderstanding. Every breath he took was a quiet prayer for strength, every glance a reminder of the family and comrades who believed in him, and every heartbeat a defiant drum that echoed his unbroken spirit. Marcus Hayes sat silently in the courtroom, his hands bound by the cold, unforgiving metal of the handcuffs that bit into his wrists with every subtle movement, a constant physical reminder of the injustice he was enduring. The atmosphere inside. The room was thick with tension and unspoken judgments. The murmurs of the gathered crowd blended with the shuffling of papers and the occasional cough, underscoring the weight of the moment. The prosecutor rose methodically, his voice clear but heavy with an undercurrent of bias, as he laid out the case against Marcus, a case built on circumstantial and flimsy evidence, relying on unreliable, prejudiced witness statements, and fueled by a desperate rush to judgment rather than a careful pursuit of truth. Each word felt like a strike against Marcus's dignity, an attempt to paint him as guilty before he had the chance to defend himself. Across the aisle, Marcus's defense attorney stood resolute, presenting a compelling argument that highlighted Marcus's impeccable service record, his unwavering dedication to his country, and his exemplary character that had been forged in the crucible of combat and sacrifice. The lawyer spoke of Marcus's bravery under fire, his precision as a sniper who had saved countless lives, and the honor with which he carried himself both in the military and in civilian life. Yet despite these powerful testimonies, the courtroom was suffused with an oppressive atmosphere, one where prejudice and skepticism shadowed every glance cast toward Marcus, where the color of his skin seemed to speak louder than the facts. Marcus felt the weight of countless eyes, some curious, others hostile, as if the trial was not just about the charges but about reaffirming deep-seated biases. He clenched his jaw, drawing on every ounce of discipline instilled in him through years of military training, determined not to break under the strain. Just as the tension in the room seemed unbearable, the courtroom doors suddenly swung open with a sharp crack that silenced the whispers and drew every head to the entrance. A hush fell instantly, a charged silence filled with surprise and anticipation, as a tall figure in a crisp, immaculate military uniform strode confidently into the room. General David Armstrong, a revered four-star general known not only for his strategic brilliance, but also for his unwavering integrity, stood tall and commanding. The murmurs swelled into audible gasps as those present recognized the man who had entered. Marcus's former commanding officer and mentor, a man whose presence alone carried enormous weight. The general's eyes were fierce yet filled with sorrow and apology as he scanned the courtroom, taking in the scene of injustice unfolding before him. Without hesitation, he approached the judge's bench and formally requested permission to speak. His voice, steady yet charged with deep emotion, echoed through the courtroom as he began to recount the distinguished service record of Corporal Marcus Hayes, detailing the countless missions he had undertaken with unmatched courage, the lives he had saved through his precision and calm under fire, and the respect he had earned from every person who had served alongside him. General Armstrong spoke not just as a superior officer, but as someone who had witnessed firsthand the character and valor of the man unjustly accused. The courtroom hung on every word, the general's testimony cutting through the haze of prejudice and doubt like a beacon of truth. In a moment that would forever be etched in the memories of all present, the general publicly apologized for the injustice Marcus was enduring, acknowledging the pain caused not only to Marcus, but to the ideals of justice and honor the military and the nation claimed to uphold. His apology was more than words. It was a powerful act of advocacy, a call to the court to see Marcus not as a suspect defined by race or circumstance, but as a hero deserving of respect and fairness. The judge, visibly moved, signaled for the prosecution to reconsider the evidence with renewed impartiality, while murmurs of support for Marcus began to ripple through the courtroom. For the first time since the ordeal began, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope, that truth and justice might prevail despite the heavy odds. The presence of the general had shifted the narrative, challenging everyone present to confront their assumptions and biases, and to recognize the human being behind the handcuffs. As the hearing adjourned for the day, Marcus's lawyer quietly conferred with the general, strategizing the path forward with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Outside the courtroom, reporters clamored for statements, sensing a story that transcended a simple legal case, a story about courage, injustice, and redemption. Marcus, still feeling the sting of the cuffs but buoyed by the general's support, resolved to fight not just for his own vindication, but to shine a light on the systemic failures that had brought him here. He understood now more clearly than ever that this was not just his battle. It was a fight for dignity and equality for all who had ever been marginalized or wrongly accused. The day's events had marked a turning point, a moment when the voice of honor and experience had pierced through the darkness of prejudice, offering a chance for justice to emerge. And as Marcus left the courtroom that day, his head held high despite the weight still on his shoulders, he carried with him the unshakable conviction that truth, when championed courageously, could prevail even in the face of overwhelming odds. With General Armstrong's commanding and heartfelt testimony ringing through the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted palpably. What had seemed a foregone conclusion was now being questioned with a newfound intensity and clarity that none could ignore. The judge, a figure who until that moment had appeared detached and procedural, suddenly leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he began to meticulously re-examine every piece of evidence, every statement made, and every assumption that had been accepted too easily before. The cold handcuffs that had bound Marcus Hayes, a symbol not just of his personal restraint, but of a deeper systemic injustice, were ordered removed with deliberate solemnity, the metal clinking softly as they were taken off his wrists, freeing not only his hands but igniting a powerful sense of vindication that surged through him. The judge's decision to grant a temporary dismissal of the charges was a clear signal that the court recognized the seriousness of the errors that had led to Marcus's arrest, yet also an acknowledgement that the matter was far from resolved, demanding a full and impartial investigation into the circumstances surrounding the arrest and the conduct of the officers involved. As the courtroom turned into a chamber of accountability, the very police officers who had handcuffed Marcus were summoned to stand before the court and explain their actions under oath, a moment charged with tension as they faced scrutiny for the first time, compelled to justify decisions that were rapidly unraveling under the weight of undeniable bias and misconduct. It soon became painfully apparent that racial profiling had played a significant role in the officers' hasty judgment, a revelation that sent shockwaves through those present, sparking murmurs of disbelief and outrage. The implications extended beyond a single courtroom, touching a raw nerve in the community and igniting a media frenzy as journalists seized upon the story, portraying Marcus not merely as an individual wronged, but as a symbol of the systemic flaws and injustices entrenched within law enforcement practices across the nation. News outlets, social media platforms, and public forums erupted with debates, calls for reform, and expressions of solidarity with Marcus, who had unexpectedly become a beacon for accountability and change. Amidst this whirlwind, Marcus himself experienced a complex swirl of emotions. Relief that the truth was emerging, gratitude for the powerful ally who had stood up on his behalf, but also a profound determination that this moment transcended his personal ordeal, representing instead a clarion call to confront and dismantle the deep-rooted biases that continued to poison his country's justice system and society at large. The recognition that his fight was part of a larger battle for dignity and equality lent Marcus a renewed sense of purpose and strength, fueling his resolve to not only clear his name, but to work toward meaningful change. As advocates and activists rallied around the case, Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight, invited to speak at community events, forums, and panels where he shared his story with raw honesty and unwavering courage, inspiring others who had faced similar struggles to stand tall and demand justice. General Armstrong, meanwhile, leveraged his considerable influence within the military and beyond, calling for institutional reforms and fostering dialogues aimed at bridging divides and rooting out prejudice wherever it lurked. The case became a catalyst for nationwide conversations on racial profiling, policing practices, and the urgent need for accountability and empathy in law enforcement, with policymakers and community leaders grappling with how to translate outrage into lasting reform. Yet amid the public attention and swirling media coverage, Marcus remained grounded, drawing strength from his family, comrades, and the core values instilled in him during his years of service: honor, integrity, and resilience. He understood that the path ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but he was no stranger to adversity, having faced far greater dangers in combat zones, and now he was determined to channel his experiences into driving systemic change. Every interview, every speech, every meeting with lawmakers was infused with the same quiet dignity and fierce resolve that had marked his military career, making him not only a survivor, but a leader in the struggle against injustice. The temporary dismissal of charges was only the beginning of a broader reckoning that rippled through the community and the nation, forcing institutions to confront uncomfortable truths and inspiring others to demand accountability and respect for all citizens, regardless of race or background. In the quiet moments, when the noise of media and public discourse faded, Marcus reflected on the bitter irony of his journey, how a man who had dedicated his life to protecting his country was nearly destroyed by the very system he had sworn to defend. But rather than succumbing to bitterness, he chose hope, believing that his story could help forge a better future. This chapter in his life became a testament to the power of courage, truth, and the impact that one voice backed by honor and justice can have in challenging entrenched systems and changing the course of history. And as Marcus looked ahead, freed from his physical restraints but still burdened by the larger fight, he knew that this was not just a personal victory, but a collective call to action, one that demanded vigilance, compassion, and unwavering commitment to ensuring that no one else would endure the humiliation and pain he had suffered. The courtroom that day, once a place of fear and accusation, had transformed into a symbol of hope and possibility, proof that even in the darkest moments, justice could prevail when people dared to stand up and speak out. And with that knowledge burning brightly in his heart, Marcus Hayes stepped forward into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, fueled by the strength of truth and the promise of a fairer, more just society. After the courtroom ordeal that had nearly broken him, but instead forged an unshakable resolve, Corporal Marcus Hayes emerged not only exonerated, but transformed into a living emblem of resilience, dignity, and the profound fight for justice, both inside and outside the military. The weight of the handcuffs and the humiliation they represented still lingered in his mind and body, like a ghostly scar, a reminder of the painful fragility of justice when clouded by prejudice. Yet Marcus refused to let that memory become a source of bitterness or despair. Instead, he chose to harness it as fuel for change, channeling every ounce of his strength and experience into a new mission that transcended combat missions overseas, focusing now on the battle against systemic injustice and the cultivation of respect within the institutions sworn to protect all citizens. In the months following his exoneration, Marcus was invited to participate in law enforcement training programs across the country, where his story became a powerful tool to educate officers on the dangers of implicit bias, the devastating consequences of racial profiling, and the imperative need for empathy and respect in policing practices, transforming what had been a personal nightmare into a collective lesson for the future. His presence in these training sessions, standing tall and calm, a decorated Marine sniper who had faced the fiercest enemies but had been nearly undone by the very system he served, resonated deeply, prompting honest reflection and, in many cases, genuine change among officers who recognized the humanity behind the uniform and the profound impact their actions could have on the lives of those they swore to protect. Parallel to Marcus's efforts, General David Armstrong, whose intervention in the courtroom had been pivotal, used his significant influence within both the military and broader national conversations to advocate for structural reforms, calling for more comprehensive bias training, transparent accountability measures, and the fostering of a culture where equality was not just a slogan but a lived reality. The general's voice, powerful and respected, helped open doors that had long been closed to discussions of racial injustice within these institutions, inspiring both leaders and rank-and-file members to confront uncomfortable truths and commit to meaningful change. Marcus's return to active duty marked not a return to the shadows, but a step into a spotlight, where he embodied the ideals of honor and courage not just in warfare, but in the ongoing struggle for justice at home. His fellow service members looked to him not only as a skilled marksman, but as a symbol of dignity and perseverance in the face of adversity, someone who had turned personal trauma into a catalyst for hope and progress. His presence uplifted those around him, creating ripples of awareness and compassion that spread beyond the military base into the civilian communities they served and protected. Even as Marcus excelled in his duties, his life became intertwined with advocacy work, speaking engagements, and collaboration with organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform, racial equality, and veteran support, weaving a tapestry of impact that honored both his military service and his commitment to societal healing. The scars from that harrowing day remained, etched invisibly in his heart and mind, reminding him daily of the fragility of fairness and the ongoing work required to safeguard it. But rather than weigh him down, those scars became a source of empathy, guiding his interactions and fueling his determination to prevent others from experiencing similar injustices. His story spread far beyond local headlines and courtroom walls, touching lives nationwide, and inspiring a new generation to believe that courage means standing tall, not only on distant battlefields, but also in the face of prejudice, false accusations, and systemic barriers. Marcus Hayes's journey illustrated that true heroism transcends medals and marksmanship. It lies in the ability to confront injustice with unwavering dignity, to transform pain into purpose, and to lead by example in building a world where respect and fairness are not privileges, but rights for all. And as the years unfolded, Marcus continued to embody this legacy, balancing the roles of soldier, advocate, mentor, and symbol, proving that sometimes the loudest and most profound apologies come not merely in words, but through sustained action and commitment to doing better. His life became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and the unyielding belief that justice, no matter how delayed or challenged, can and must prevail, reminding all who heard his story that the fight for equality is ongoing, that the cost of silence is too high, and that courage, in its highest form, is the courage to stand tall against injustice wherever it is found.